There are moments in life when you pray and all you hear is silence. You ask, you seek, you knock, but it feels like nothing is moving, nothing is changing. It's in those quiet seasons that many people begin to wonder, did I do something wrong? Has God forgotten me? But what you have to understand is that silence is not abandonment. Silence is not rejection. Silence is often the sacred space where God begins the real work, deep, invisible, transformative work. You may not hear His voice, but He's positioning your soul for something greater than your ears can comprehend. God doesn't always answer with a thunderclap. He doesn't always show up in loud signs. Sometimes He withdraws the noise so He can anchor you in truth. He allows the volume of life to lower, not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because if He responded every time with the answer you wanted, you would never develop the faith to trust Him when He doesn't. And sometimes the silence is the gift. It's the space where your faith matures. It's where your identity is clarified. It's where you stop depending on feelings and start standing on what you know. There's something powerful about stillness. In the stillness, your soul can breathe again. In the quiet, you remember who you are. When the noise dies down, the opinions of others, the distractions, the pressure to perform, what's left is the voice of God echoing not in your ears, but in your spirit. And that's where true repositioning begins. Not in the doing, not in the striving, but in the quiet surrender where God says, know that I've got your attention. Let me show you who you are again. You see, God doesn't waste silence. He uses it to settle what noise has shaken. He uses it to stabilize what chaos has thrown off balance. Some of the greatest shifts in your life will come after the quiet seasons. You may think nothing is happening, but God is preparing you, maturing you, realigning you. When God gets ready to elevate you, He doesn't shout about it. He gets quiet, because the repositioning of the soul isn't for applause. It's for alignment. You may be in a season right now where everything feels paused. You're not where you used to be, but you're not quite where you thought you'd be either. And it's easy to get frustrated in that in-between space. But don't mistake quiet for inactive. Don't confuse God's silence for His absence. He hasn't stopped working. He's just working deeper than before. This is the season where He's not changing your circumstances. He's changing you. He's teaching you how to lean into Him without needing constant reassurance. He's shaping your discernment, refining your character, strengthening your spirit. Have you ever noticed that in the natural, some of the most significant transformations happen in silence? A seed becomes a tree in the soil, quietly. A baby grows in the womb, silently. The sun rises every morning without making a sound. And yet we often look for God in the loud, the dramatic, the visible. But He says, be still and know. Know what? That He is God, that He is faithful, that He is still moving, still speaking, still guiding, even in the silence. Sometimes the silence is the sign that you're being protected. If God had answered you when you first asked, you might have rushed into something you weren't ready for. If He had opened the door when you knocked, it might have led to a room filled with distraction rather than purpose. God's silence is not a denial, it's a divine delay. And not just any delay, but a delay designed to reposition your soul to carry what He's about to place in your hands. You've got to trust that in this season, your roots are growing deeper. You might not see the fruit yet, but the foundation is being laid. God is teaching you how to walk by faith, not by sight. And walking by faith means you keep moving even when it's quiet. You keep believing even when there's no confirmation. You keep praising even when there's no breakthrough in sight. Because you know that silence is not the end of the story. It's just the part where God is turning the page. Don't get discouraged in the quiet. Don't let the enemy whisper lies into that silence. He'll tell you God has forgotten you. He'll tell you you're being punished. But those are distractions. The truth is, God is closer than you think. He's drawing near, not in noise, but in nearness. He's building something in you that can't be built in a storm. It takes silence to shape certain strengths. It takes stillness to discover certain gifts. If God had answered too soon, you would have stepped into the blessing with the wrong mindset. But now, because of the silence, you've learned how to be content without applause. You've discovered how to be faithful without the fanfare. You've found your identity in Him, not in the opinions of others. And that's the kind of repositioning that doesn't just move you forward. It anchors you for what's ahead. You don't have to force anything right now. Let the silence do what it's designed to do. Let it pull you inward so you can grow upward. Let it break the attachments to things that weren't meant to go with you to your next season. Let it purify your motives, realign your vision, and strengthen your resolve. Because when God breaks the silence, it won't be just to speak, it will be to send. And when He sends you, you'll be ready. Not because you moved in the noise, but because you were repositioned in the quiet. This season of silence is sacred. It's holy ground. You may not feel it now, but you're not just waiting. You're being prepared. You're not being overlooked. You're being fortified. What looks like inactivity is actually intentionality. Heaven is orchestrating a new rhythm in your soul. And soon, what God has been doing in private will be revealed in power. So hold steady. Keep your heart open. Stay in the posture of surrender. Don't rush the process. Don't despise the silence. It's not your enemy. It's your preparation. It's not the void. It's the vessel. Silence is God's way of saying, I'm not done with you. I'm just getting started. But before I launch you, I'm going to reposition your soul. And when that repositioning is complete, you won't have to announce your breakthrough. The fruit will speak for itself. God's silence is not absence. It's alignment. That's something we have to settle deep in our hearts, because there will be seasons in life where we'll go through days, weeks, sometimes even years where it feels like heaven has gone quiet. You've prayed, you've fasted, you've cried out, and yet there's no voice, no confirmation, no divine sign lighting the path in front of you. And in those moments, it's easy to assume that silence means God has stepped away. But the truth is, silence often means He's drawing closer in a different way, not through words, but through movement beneath the surface. When God is silent, it doesn't mean He's absent. It doesn't mean you've missed it or you're being punished. It often means that He's aligning something deep within your soul. He's getting you into position, realigning your thoughts, your heart, your expectations, so that when He does speak, you're ready to hear it. See, if God spoke too soon, we might misunderstand His words. If He opened the door before we were steady, we might walk into the opportunity unprepared. So instead of speaking, He aligns. Instead of giving answers, He gives alignment. Think about it this way. When a doctor sets a broken bone, they don't just slap a cast on it and send you out the door. They take time to align the bone properly, making sure it's positioned for healing. That alignment process can be painful. It requires stillness, and it often involves silence. But that doesn't mean the doctor is absent. It means the healing is happening, and it has to be set right before strength can return. That's exactly how God works. He's not ignoring you. He's setting you in alignment with His will. Alignment is about order. It's about making sure the inner world matches what God has spoken over your life. Because God is not going to bless confusion. He's not going to elevate disorder. So when He goes silent, it's often because He's cleaning house on the inside. He's rearranging your soul. You may not feel it, but He's moving things around. He's pulling out what doesn't belong, strengthening what needs to stay, and preparing the foundation for what's coming next. In those quiet seasons, you may find yourself growing restless. You may try to fill the silence with noise, people's opinions, distractions, business, anything to avoid the stillness. But stillness is sacred. It's in the stillness that God brings clarity. It's in the quiet that He whispers things to your soul that would be drowned out by the noise. The silence isn't a void, it's a vessel. It's the space where alignment takes place, where your soul starts to come into agreement with heaven. Sometimes we pray for direction, and when we don't hear anything, we assume we're lost. But what if the silence is the direction? What if the quiet is God saying, "Stay still. I'm working behind the scenes. Don't move until I say move"? That takes trust. That takes spiritual maturity. Because our human nature wants action, results, visible signs. But God is more concerned about what's happening in you than what's happening around you. And sometimes, silence is the only way He can get your full attention. When you start to understand that silence is a form of alignment, you stop fighting it. You stop trying to rush out of the season. You stop assuming that quiet means something is wrong. You start to lean into it. You start to ask, "God, what are you setting in order in me?" Maybe He's aligning your identity, reminding you that your worth isn't in your performance, your title, or other people's approval. Maybe He's aligning your priorities, pulling your focus off of the temporary and back onto the eternal. Maybe He's aligning your heart, healing wounds you tried to ignore, closing chapters you weren't ready to let go of, preparing you to love again from a whole place. This alignment process may feel uncomfortable. It may stretch you. You might feel lonely. You might question everything. But that's not a sign to give up. That's a sign to press in. Because the discomfort is often the indication that things are being put back in place. The ache you feel isn't the absence of God. It's the evidence that something inside you is shifting, maturing, growing. It's a spiritual recalibration. There are blessings you've prayed for that require a certain posture of heart. If God gave them to you without that alignment, they'd crush you. You wouldn't be able to carry them with grace. So instead of rushing the blessing, God takes His time. He lets silence do what noise never could. Bring everything back into its rightful place. He prepares you not just to receive the promise, but to steward it well. And when you finally come into alignment, you don't just hear the voice of God, you recognize it. You don't just step into your purpose, you walk in it with confidence. So don't let the silence shake your faith. Let it anchor your trust. Don't run from it, let it do its work. Because when God is silent, He's not standing still. He's moving you into alignment with a future you can't see yet. And when the alignment is complete, the silence will break not with chaos, but with clarity, confirmation, and calling. When heaven is quiet, it's because God is working in the deep. That's something we often miss when we're going through those long, silent seasons where we can't seem to trace God's hand or hear His voice. We look around and nothing appears to be changing. We pray and get no response. We cry out and the heavens seem like brass. But what we don't realize is that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It usually means everything is happening, just not where you can see it. God doesn't always move in the visible. Sometimes He chooses to work in the deep places, beneath the surface, where the roots of your destiny are formed. God is not limited to the obvious. He doesn't need to show you movement to produce growth. In fact, the deepest, most lasting growth happens in hidden spaces. A seed doesn't sprout immediately. Long before it breaks through the soil, it's establishing roots. It's drawing strength. It's going deep so it can grow tall. And that's what God is doing when He goes quiet. He's growing your foundation. He's strengthening your inner life so you can stand tall when the breakthrough comes. You may not see anything happening, but He's digging into the depths of your soul, rearranging things, renewing things, restoring things that can't be touched by surface level activity. That's why it can feel like nothing makes sense during those seasons. Because God isn't fixing surface problems. He's dealing with root issues. He's going back to things you thought were resolved, things you forgot about, things you've buried because you didn't know how to face them. And He's not bringing them up to harm you. He's doing it so He can heal them properly. And real healing doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the silence. Sometimes it comes when you feel like you're in the wilderness, alone, forgotten. But the truth is, you're not alone. You're just being worked on in a place too deep for applause. God's deepest work happens in the dark. It's in the dark that He shapes character. It's in the dark that He forms integrity. It's in the dark that He tests your heart. Not to fail you, but to prepare you. You've been asking Him for elevation, for promotion, for the next level. And God says, before I raise you up, I have to make sure your soul is anchored. And anchoring doesn't happen on the surface. It happens in the deep. So while you're thinking nothing's moving, heaven is digging deep wells in your spirit so you won't collapse under the weight of the calling. When a builder constructs a tall skyscraper, they don't start by building upward. They start by digging deep. The taller the building, the deeper the foundation has to go. And the same is true for your life. You want to go higher. God's going to take you deeper. And that means He's going to get quiet sometimes. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. He's going to pull you away from the noise, away from the distractions, away from the crowds, because what He's building in you can't be rushed. It has to be solid. It has to last. It has to withstand pressure. And that kind of strength doesn't come from shallow experiences. It comes from deep encounters. That's why you can't measure God's activity by your emotions. Just because you don't feel Him doesn't mean He's not working. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean He's left you. It means He's operating on a level that doesn't require your understanding, only your trust. He's operating on the heart level, the soul level, the eternal level. And sometimes that work is so holy, so intimate, that it has to be done in silence. It's not for public consumption. It's not for everyone else to see. It's just between you and God in the deep. There are things God wants to place in your hands that require depth of character, depth of wisdom, depth of discernment. And if He gave it to you too early, before the deep work was complete, it would overwhelm you. So instead of rushing the process, He chooses to go slow and quiet. He lets you feel the weight of waiting so that you can carry the weight of purpose. He lets you walk through silence so that you can emerge with substance. Because substance is what sustains you when applause fades. Substance is what holds you together when pressure mounts. And substance is only built in the deep. You may not understand everything right now. You may feel like you're drifting, like your prayers are hitting a wall, like you've been forgotten. But you haven't been forgotten. You've been chosen for depth. You've been selected for something that requires more than momentary motivation. You're being shaped for something lasting. And the deep work takes time. It takes stillness. It takes faith. Because you won't always have signs. You won't always have feelings. Sometimes all you'll have is the quiet and the conviction that God is not done with you. And that's enough. Because if God is quiet, it means He's near. If God is silent, it means He's at work. Not in the places where others can see, but in the places where you truly live, in your mindset, in your heart, in your belief system, in your ability to endure, in your trust. He's working in the deep because He loves you too much to leave you shallow, and when the deep work is finished, the fruit will show. Not immediately, not all at once, but steadily, and you'll look back and realize the silence wasn't a setback, it was a setup for strength, a setup for clarity, a setup for destiny. Because God does His most powerful work where no one's watching. In the deep, sometimes God has to quiet the noise around you so you can finally hear what's going on inside you. We live in a world that's loud, constant notifications, opinions flying from every direction, people telling you what to do, where to go, how to think. And if we're not careful, we start mistaking movement for meaning and noise for direction. But there comes a moment in your journey when God steps in and starts turning down the volume on everything around you. Suddenly, people start fading into the background. Opportunities that used to excite you no longer move you. You try to reach out to certain relationships and they go quiet. What's happening? God is creating silence, not to frustrate you, but to refocus you. Because clarity doesn't come from chaos. Direction doesn't come from distraction. If you're going to hear what God is trying to do in your soul, You're going to have to be willing to sit in silence long enough to confront what you've been running from. And that's exactly what the noise tries to prevent. Stillness. Noise can be a way of avoiding. It can become a numbing agent, something you use to drown out what you don't want to deal with. But God, in His mercy, will strip all that away. He'll pull you out of the crowd. He'll close doors that don't make sense. He'll remove voices you thought you needed, not because He's punishing you, but because He's trying to make room for the one voice that matters, His. Sometimes we get so caught up in the volume of the voices around us that we don't even realize how much they've been shaping our direction. We start carrying other people's expectations. We live by timelines that culture created. We pursue goals that don't even align with our purpose, just because everyone else is chasing them. And over time, we lose the sound of our own soul. We forget what peace feels like. We confuse being busy with being purposeful. And that's why God has to intervene and quiet the noise. Because He knows that what's ahead of you requires focus, and you can't have focus with constant static in the background. When God starts silencing things, it can feel lonely. It can feel like everything familiar is being pulled away. But that's where the transformation begins. Because in that silence, you start hearing yourself again. You start recognizing what's real versus what was just a response to pressure. You begin to rediscover desires that were buried under survival mode. You start to question, not from a place of doubt, but from a place of depth. You begin to evaluate who you are without the applause, without the validation, without the performance. And that's when God begins to speak, not always audibly, but deeply. He speaks through conviction. He speaks through clarity. He speaks through that sudden peace you feel when you stop chasing what everyone else thinks you should have by now. He speaks through moments of stillness that bring more revelation than 100 conversations ever could. But that kind of hearing doesn't happen when you're surrounded by noise. It happens when God gets you alone, not to isolate you, but to refine you. There's something sacred about silence. It exposes what noise can hide, and that can be uncomfortable. You'll start to see things in yourself you didn't want to face. Fears you've suppressed, wounds you've ignored, mindsets that no longer serve you. But God brings those things to the surface because He wants to heal them, not shame you. And once you face what's inside, once you allow the silence to do its work, you come out lighter. You come out clearer. You come out stronger because now you're not just moving. You're moving in the right direction. Some of the greatest breakthroughs don't come through a shout, but through a whisper. And God doesn't whisper when there's chaos. He whispers in stillness. That's why the enemy loves noise. Because if he can keep you distracted, he can keep you from discernment. If he can keep your life loud, he can keep your spirit confused. But the moment you submit to the silence, the moment you stop fighting the stillness and start leaning into it, your perspective begins to shift. You stop looking at the silence as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. God is preparing you in the quiet so He can trust you in the crowd. You can't carry clarity into your next season if your soul is still cluttered. So God simplifies your environment so He can strengthen your identity. He strips away what's not essential so you can finally see what's eternal. That's why some connections didn't last. That's why some rooms started to feel uncomfortable. That's why certain voices went quiet. God was tuning your frequency to match your future. He was clearing out interference so you could hear the instructions clearly. And the instructions that matter most rarely come in the noise. They come in the stillness. So when the noise starts to die down, don't panic. Don't try to fill the silence with artificial substitutes. Don't go running back to familiar chaos. Let the silence speak. Let it reorder your thoughts. Let it bring truth to the surface. Because what's coming next requires a version of you that's been refined in silence, not distracted by sound. And when the noise is gone and all that's left is His voice, you'll realize the silence wasn't empty. It was full of everything you really needed. There are moments in life when it feels like God has pressed pause. Everything around you slows down. The doors that once opened so easily are now sealed shut. The opportunities that used to chase you suddenly dry up. The momentum you had built begins to fade, and all you're left with is quiet. It's in these seasons that you start questioning what went wrong. You look back, wondering if you missed a step, said the wrong thing, made the wrong move. But what if that pause isn't punishment? What if that silence is sacred? What if God hasn't stopped your life? He's just repositioning it. See, when life gets still, when heaven goes quiet, it's not always a sign that you've lost your way. Sometimes, it's a sign that you've reached a new level of trust. God doesn't always shout His plans. He often whispers them in stillness. And before He shifts you into a new place physically, He'll often shift you internally. He'll slow things down, not to discourage you, but to teach you how to move in sync with Him. That's the thing about divine repositioning. It rarely looks like progress in the moment. It can feel like regression, like you're moving backward. But in reality, God is pulling you back so He can launch you forward. Think of an arrow. Before it can be released toward its target, it has to be pulled back. The farther it's pulled back, the greater the force when it's released. That tension, that pressure, that moment of stillness, it's not the end. It's the setup. And in the same way, God will sometimes pull you away from everything familiar so He can realign your focus. He'll remove the noise so you can hear the next instruction. He'll allow you to sit in the quiet so you can rediscover what matters. Because when you're being repositioned, it's not about speed, it's about precision. You may have been walking a path that served you in the last season, but God sees the road ahead. He knows what you'll need 5 years from now, not just 5 days from now. So when He interrupts your plans, when He allows silence to surround your soul, it's not because you failed. It's because He's rerouting you. And that kind of divine redirection doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it just shows up in the form of stillness, unanswered prayers, closed doors, and quiet mornings where you feel like nothing is changing. But make no mistake, God is moving even when you can't see it. He's positioning people, aligning resources, preparing environments. And most importantly, He's preparing you. Because what good is a promotion if you're not ready for it? What good is a blessing if your heart can't sustain it? God loves you too much to give you something prematurely. So He'll take His time. He'll work in silence. He'll keep you hidden, not to punish you, but to preserve you. It's in the silence that motives are purified. It's in the silence that clarity begins to rise. You stop living for applause and start living from purpose. You stop running on adrenaline and start running on assignment. And when that shift happens, when your heart finally aligns with heaven's rhythm, God says, now you're ready. And when He's ready to release you, you won't have to force anything. You won't have to knock down doors that were never meant for you. The right doors will open, and you'll walk through them with confidence, because the stillness didn't just prepare the opportunity, it prepared you. There are people who will misunderstand your silence. They'll think you've lost your fire. They'll assume you've lost your direction. But don't waste time trying to explain a season that they're not assigned to understand. What God is doing in your soul doesn't need validation from outside voices. It just needs your obedience. And sometimes obedience looks like staying still when everything in you wants to move. Sometimes it looks like trusting that even when you can't hear God, He hasn't stopped speaking over your life. Remember, even when Jesus was asleep in the boat, the storm didn't stop His authority. Just because He was silent didn't mean He wasn't sovereign. And the same is true in your life. Just because God hasn't responded the way you expected doesn't mean He's absent. He's fully present. He's fully engaged. He's just choosing to do His best work beneath the surface, in places where your character is being shaped, your faith is being stretched, and your identity is being fortified. So if you're in a season where the silence feels suffocating, take a deep breath. This isn't the end. It's a reset. It's a moment to realign, to listen deeper, to trust more fully. Because what's ahead of you is too important to be rushed. And when it's time, when the preparation is complete and your soul has been realigned, God will speak again, not with chaos, but with clarity. Not with confusion, but with certainty. And you'll realize that the silence was never wasted. It was the space where your future was being shaped.